We are Locked On Houston Astros, and we hope that you join us for a daily Locked On Astros podcast. My name is Eric Heisman. You can find me on Twitter at Eric Talks Stros. You can find the show at Locked On Astros. And Brett, where can you find you?
They can find me at H-Town Wheelhouse on Twitter and Astros411 on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Always positive, always Stros.
And you can find us talking about Astros baseball all season long, talking about the Astros. And I know spring training is just in the infancy, and we're still waiting for some of the players to arrive. I know we're still waiting on Zach Greinke to arrive. This is kind of a tradition for the Astros now, second year in a row where he doesn't really arrive at the same time. He's not going to be as late as he was last year, but I think they said he's going to arrive by Friday. So that should be pretty awesome this year. But we're going to talk about a lot today. James Click says that he is planning to meet with Carlos Correa and his agent at some point during spring training. Also, what are they going to do in terms of, are they going to add any more? Are they going to add any more players before the season starts? Also, what happened last year? Was Altuve maybe distracted? And we'll talk about some more on this Locked On Astros podcast. Don't forget, you can get Locked On Astros on Podcast App Himalaya, as well as Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And when you get in your car, tell your smart device to play the podcast, Locked On Astros. You know what, Brett? We're just talking off air. You know what? With the spring training coming up and baseball in the air, I could use a belching beaver.
That's right. And I want to tell you all about a really awesome flavor that they have. It's called Hazer's Gonna Haze. And I figured since we kind of had a lot of haters in the last few years, let's talk about this. Belching Beaver says we went through a lot of irritations of our best hazy IPAs to bring you the best of the best with Hazer's Gonna Haze. The foundation of our hazy IPA is based on a rounded mouthfeel to emphasize and highlight the tropical fruit and juicy flavors and aroma from the hops. The result is a juice bomb of crushable proportions. This is an amazing 6.6% alcohol by volume. The bitterness is what's known as 35 IBUs. So if you're a bitter beer drinker, if you like those IPAs, this is a great beer for you. But let me tell you, they have so many others. They have miso honey blonde. They have peanut butter milk stout. I mean, Viva La Beaver. They have everything that you can think of. Go to belchingbeaver.bev and you can find where they're selling it here in Texas, because they just came to Texas. Go to belchingbeaver.com. Why? Because we want you to have a damn good time.
All right. With all that talking about Hazer's gonna hate and all that, and the blondes, got me thinking about Taylor Swift here. But let's go and switch the conversation to James Click. I know that Carlos Correa came out, and it was kind of like a dating show. We talked about this yesterday, and James Click Carlos Correa kind of came out and said, you know what? This is what I want, and I want somebody to come out and kind of meet these qualifications, and I would like to get a deal done before spring training. I don't want to worry about this during the regular season, and I think that I know what I'm worth. And I heard Steve Phillips on the MLB Network saying that he's so glad that Carlos Correa knows what he's worth, because he says, this is Steve Phillips saying this. He said he doesn't know what Carlos Correa is worth because he hasn't had a full season in a while. He's not counting the season last year, but Carlos Correa is a great player, and I think the Astros know this. But my question to you, and we'll talk about, I want you to read James Click's response on 790 in a second, but would Carlos Correa benefit from a healthy full 2021 season versus signing an extension now? That's something I want y'all to think about.
Yes, Carlos Correa would benefit from it. The Astros would not, because the Astros would be inexplicitly have to pay more. And so James Click, I promise you, wants to get a deal done now, and he wants it to get done on their terms. That's what they did with Altuve. That's what they did with Bregman. I guess that's what they did with Verlander. But the bottom line is that is a correct assessment. We really don't know what his value is. We know what his worth is when he's healthy.
Right.
We know he has a cannon. We know he can hit. He can take a leadership role. he has all the tools that you want. He is a clubhouse, um, tone setter, and his elite glove and elite defense is hard to replace. Okay, but here is the chink in that armor. Jeremy Pena. Jeremy Pena is the chink in that armor. In other words, Carlos Correa offers all those things, but if they don't know what he's worth and they're worried about injuries or anything like that going forward, they may be willing to wait till the end of the season to see if he tests free agency. Because if they have enough confidence in Jeremy Pena, then it might be a harder deal for Carlos Correa to strike, especially if he ups his value and they can bring in a young guy up and coming and not have to pay him hardly anything.
And what if he gets injured this season and Pena comes up and just hits the cover off the ball? That he kind of loses his leverage, and then he probably goes somewhere else. So that's
I
something both sides have to take that in consideration.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe a year ago I was kind of on the fence, but now I'm like, we've got to sign this guy. I believe from what I've heard that Carlos Correa has come in and he has shown, and I know you're going to talk about some stuff that James Click said, but James Click talked about how he basically is saying, "Hey, I'm here, I'm ready, um, I'm in the best shape of my life,"
Give
and
me a rose, man. Give me a rose.
that's right, exactly. He wants
He
to be
wants
the
a
Bachelor.
rose.
That's
All
right.
right. So this is what James Click said on 790. He said, "We felt like it was more likely to have a chance if we could get into camp and have this conversation. In other words, get into the mansion and be surrounded by all the beautiful women and have the conversation with all the other beautiful women, aka players. If we're doing this the bachelor thing, so it's a
Okay, I was like, wait, they're bringing women to entice Carlos Correa. Okay,
no,
sorry.
it's a high priority. We're going to get to it, but we want to make sure that we put it in the work. We want to put the work in before we really dig in. But we have talked about what's more important to him, and we have to and that we give us some direction and how to get this lined up. And he said it's no secret that there's going to be a lot of talent on the market next year. And we do have some talent coming up through the system. That's what you just kind of talked about. That might help us out as well. Our goal is to have this conversation with Carlos to see if that's something that we can line up. He's been Astros for his whole career, and he's made it very clear that he would like to be with us. With a guy as talented as he is, it would be prudent for us to try to line it up but it takes both sides. In other words, both sides have to agree to accept the rose.
So both of them are saying the same thing. Carlos Correa is saying, but it's going to take both sides. It's going to take them doing their part. And he's like, it's going to take Carlos and his team doing their part. So they're going to have to negotiate. I personally
It's
think,
called
let's just say
communication.
this. Exactly. Thank
Stop
you.
communicating
Yes,
with the
sir.
media. Stop communicating with media.
Right.
Communicate with each other. Sit down in a
Right.
room
Yeah.
and just say, "Hey, you sit 6 feet apart and say, hey, Carlos, what do we got to do to get this done? How many years? What's the AAV? Let's get this done."
Exactly. And I think the bottom line is this, that Carlos Correa probably, he may not benefit Eric at the end of the year, because what if they have a work stoppage? What if there is no CBA? What if there's no agreement and then they have a work stoppage and then they don't play for half a season or a year?
Yeah.
Okay, now God forbid that happens, but what if that happens? Then you've got to think. I think Carlos Correa wants to get something done now. He can set the market. He can be the standard bearer, and if he pushes his price up, he's going to drive the other shortstop prices through the roof.
Yeah, and something else that James Click has to keep in mind, and the reason why I think the Astros and Carlos Correa agreed to settle is they can't do anything about 2021. The Astros are strapped, and according to a conversation James Click had on MLB Network Radio, is he's trying to save some not James Click, but he's trying to save some dry powder. And we both had to look up what that meant. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to save some resources, because 162 games is a long season. And this is something that I've brought up on the podcast before. What happens if they need a closer at the trade deadline? And it's not the luxury tax threshold. It's not how you start the season. It's how you finish the season. And so let's say that the Astros go out and get, I know you didn't want to talk about this, but Jackie Bradley Jr. And they give him, what do the Astros have? 13 million,
Maybe, yeah, maybe 12. I don't
maybe
know if they have a
12,
full
and
13
they
yet.
give that all to Jackie Bradley Jr. They can't go out and add, even via trade, they can't go out and get a closer, because what they would have to do is offset the money they get by adding that closer by trading somebody else away. So that's something, or else they'll have to forfeit some draft picks down the road. They'll have to pay the luxury tax, and there's just so much they have to take into consideration. So what James Click is saying is that they're looking at options to improve this roster, but they also want to keep those resources available, because you can't predict what's going to happen down the road. And who would have thought in 2017 the Astros would have gone out and gotten um, Justin Verlander? And speaking
Right.
of not being able to predict what's going to happen, I know you're having some car issues right now. Who should you be calling right now?
Well, I planning to call rockauto.com to check out some various things. I don't know exactly what's going on. I'm going to have a mechanic look at it, and then go to rockauto.com, search the parts for my 2017 Nissan Titan V8. And I'm pretty sure I'll spend 30, 50, probably 100% less than I would going to the chain store down the road. Why would I don a mask and go into a store and ask questions and stand there for hours on end waiting for them to tell me they can't get the part for a month when I can go to rockauto.com? It's an easily navigable site. It has been a family-owned business for 20 years, and they're there for guys like me and guys like you. They don't upcharge us because we're not professionals. They give us the same price they give professionals. You can choose your brand, your make, your model, anything you want. So why spend twice as much for the same parts? Go to rockauto.com right now and see the parts available for your car or truck. Right, locked on, and you're in their "How did you hear about us" box, so that they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com.
All right. So also sponsoring the Locked On Astros podcast is betonline.ag. And instead of doing a traditional commercial, we wanted to kind of throw out some kind of odds. What did you call it? The numbers out there. And these are the odds for the Astros players out there, the lines. And so I want to go ahead and throw out the Cy Young Award winners out there. And this 4 Astros actually made the line out there. One of them is kind of surprising. And this guy could actually make the show today, but Lance McCullers didn't make the list, and I'm kind of glad that he wasn't on tonight. He'll be hopefully on tomorrow. But Framber Valdez is plus 2,500. Zach Greinke is plus 2,500. Christian Javier is on the list with plus 6,600. Jose Urquidy is at plus 6,600. I am very surprised that Lance McCullers is not on the list, but we'll talk about that later. What about the Astros hitters? What are they projected to do?
Well, they've got a lot better odds, plus 6,600. If you make that bet and you win it, you're going to make yourself very rich. But let's talk about something that's probably more probable. Yordan Alvarez, they have him ranked 10th at plus 1,600 with having the most home runs at the end of the season. Very doable, especially if he stays healthy, especially if his knees stay intact. And the MVP race, there are actually 4 Astros listed. At top of the list, ranked at number 2, is Alex Bregman at plus 1,000. Right under, guess who? Mike Trout. So Mike Trout leads with plus 800 most home runs. He leads plus 250 for MVP. But our own guy, Alex Bregman, is right behind him at plus 1,000. You go put $100 down on that and he wins. Oh my gosh, you just got you a trip to Vegas. Carlos Correa plus 4,000. Altuve and Tucker are all plus 4,000. Not super great odds on those guys, but they're in the mix. Carlos Correa is the highest of those other 3. So you've got some Astros that are in the mix. The Astros are looking to make some noise. And I've heard several people say that Alex Bregman could very well win MVP this season. And I think that bodes well for him for those expectations. So go to betonline.ag. They are your sports book experts. And when you go, use the promo code Locked On, and you'll receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline.ag, your online sportsbook experts.
All righty. While we're talking about betting, let's go into talk about why we think that Miles Straw is going to be your leadoff hitter in 2021. I'll go and get us started. Let's do a rapid fire. I think that he's going to do it because outside of George Springer, who led off the most in 2020, that would be Miles Straw. Your turn.
Oh, I thought you were going to ask me to answer it. I think Miles Straw right now is putting in a lot of hard work and learning how to lay down bunts, get infield singles. And
Rapid
hey,
fire,
remember,
rapid fire, rapid fire. Come on.
okay, he hit 300 in the minors. Go.
All right. I think that he has the speed to steal some bases and go first or third. Go.
He he will get on base and he will get pitches because who they have behind him, Alex Bregman or Altuve.
Okay. All right. All right. All right. I feel you there. All right. So speaking of that,
Oh
so
wait,
I
wait,
know.
hold on. Was that the end of rapid fire? Did I just
Well,
did I
no,
just seal it?
you just did. It was like slow fire there for a while
That
there.
was that was not
You're
slow
like
fire.
you were like a
I sealed
Martin
the deal.
Maldonado fire. That's what you were, but that's fine.
Wow.
But
Wow.
speaking of Alex Bregman
I feel
winning
like Brett
MVP,
Wallace right now.
speaking of Alex Bregman winning MVP, he is a little bit hampered right now. And so we do have to kind of worry about this. And according to Dusty Baker, this is something that he was dealing with a little bit last year, apparently, but it's not something that he has to worry about. Where's that? So this is what Dusty Baker just said, that he tweaked his hamstring this spring training, and this is something. This is what some thoughts from Dusty Baker. He said it's something that was here last year, and then he tweaked it while he was working out this winter. You know how hard he works. We may have to monitor his work for his own sake because this guy works. His hamstring is sore. Again, we just got to take care of him. And then also to another injury note, and this is not really injury note. This is more of they're just taking it easy with Jordan Alvarez, and he is not allowed on this side of the fence. Apparently, he's got to work inside. But he said it is no secret with Alvarez. He is recovering from surgery, and we've got to take him slow. So basically, they're working out indoors, and they're not allowed to go outdoors and risk injuring their knees or their hamstrings any further. But that, I don't think this is going to endanger their starting the season. If this is something that makes them miss any spring training games and no any prolonged spring training games, that's where I would worry. But I don't want to spend too much time on this because I want to talk about Mr. Jose Altuve. That's the big news of the day. And last year, apparently, it wasn't just the yips in the playoffs. It wasn't just that he struggled at the plate. There's a little bit more going on to Jose Altuve.
Yeah, Michael Brantley actually mentioned today. He said we had a long conversation on day one. He's in a great mental spot, great physical spot. He's one of the main reasons the Houston Astros are who we are. I expect big things out of him. He looks great. He's running around with a big smile on his face. Remember last year you and I talked about this. I'm gonna give you a quote from Altuve in a second. Remember you and I talked about the Astros needed to get back to having fun. And Altuve just didn't look like he was having fun. And when he was having the defensive struggles in the playoffs, I mean, that was brutal, watching that. Altuve said this: I think I just have a better approach and game plan. I feel like this year I have a game plan. I know what I want to do, and I think it's going to help me a lot. And his teammates have already noticed, and as I said with Brantley, Gurriel said he looks incredible for the first few days. I've been surprised how good he looks this quickly in camp. He's throwing super good, and he has a real potent arm. That's good to hear. He has a real potent arm. Let's hang on that, because remember last year everybody's like, "Oh, he has no arm. He can't throw. He's done." Like it was like, no, the guy, it was in his head, and you could tell it was a mental breakdown. And Jose Altuve cares deeply for his craft. He cares deeply for who he represents, not just the city, but his family and his country. And he takes a lot of pride. And when he feels like he's delegitimized by what I call false allegations, because we know the truth here at Locked On Astros, that it really, he took it to heart.
Yes, and Dusty Baker did mention that he did deal with some deaths in 2020. Also, he had to deal with we found out, what's the guy's name? The guy that logged all the trash cans, all the different banes.
Tony Adams.
Yeah, Tony Adams. He found that Jose Altuve did not use the trash can scheme. So you have Jose Altuve, who is a almost guaranteed Hall of Famer, and he didn't want to have any part of this. And now his legacy is going to be tarnished because of this. So he was down because of that. And so this is what Baker had to say about that. He's mentally strong, but sensitive at the same time. And that's a rare combination. So last year was a down year for Jose Altuve. If you're in fantasy baseball, go trade for Jose Altuve. Go trade for Alex Bregman. These are guys that had down years. Yuli Gurriel, he had a down year as well because he gained a little bit weight last year, and he even admitted that he was exhausted and he wasn't having the fun. And we talked about that all season last year, all 60 games of it. They didn't look like they were having fun until the playoffs, until they started having fun and they started winning. So Altuve said for the first time in a while, he started really working. I mean, not that he never worked in the off season, but he really started focusing on certain things. He worked on throwing the ball, something that's always come natural to him. He worked on it. He worked on other stuff. I mean, he's not going to come out and say that, but he worked on stuff, and that's good to see your superstar, your team leader, come kind of doing that type of stuff. So it's awesome to see that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna let you keep going.
Okay. So it's awesome to see that. And to kind of talk a little bit more about what Gurriel said, he said, after the first month of the season, I felt really exhausted. So that's something I worked a lot on in the off season, just to get feeling better physically, and also the mental side of things as well. But I think free agency was what weighing on me a little. So when what the Astros did was they tacked on that extra year, especially after George Springer left. They went ahead, added the extra year of free agency for 20. I mean, they signed the extra year for 2022. So he didn't have to worry about that as well. So the Astros took care of Yuli Gurriel. So I think for the next 2 years, Yuli Gurriel will take care of the Astros. Yes, Bregman missed some games last year with the hamstring issue, but I don't think this is going to be a big issue. But the best sight at Astros camp so far was Forrest Whitley with his long flowing hair in the outfield, and he is there. Apparently, it was the intake. I guess they calling it the COVID intake testing, and doesn't mean he tested positive or negative. I don't know what the case was, but him and a couple other players just were delayed. That's what they're calling. But to see him out
Yeah,
there onto the field, go ahead.
yeah. Sorry about that. My throat was getting really dry, and I was about to start coughing on there. And I didn't want to do that. That'd be bad. I think another thing we need to look at too is Kyle Tucker's come in looking really strong. And I know we talked about Alvarez earlier. I don't know if you saw that picture that Chandler Rome posted of him. That dude is stacked and jacked. Like he's ready
I said
to.
that. I remember I said he's thick. That's what I meant. He's got more
Oh,
muscles.
that's
He's
okay. See,
thick.
I didn't know you were mentioning. I thought,
No,
okay,
he's thick. You don't know what the kids say, thick. He's muscular, just like Alex Bregman got all thick. So yeah. So yeah, these guys, I think this team came after a down year, being one of the only 3 teams, I think now in history, to go into playoffs with a losing record. That weighs on you. I don't care what you say, that weighs on you. So I think the Astros have
I thought it
unfinished
was.
business. I think they come in with unfinished business, and I think that they're like, yeah, it's this is the time that we need to take care of business. And so hopefully we can get Lance McCullers back on tomorrow. And anything else you want to say before we go?
No, I just think that the outlook is actually really, really good for the Astros. Injuries is going to be something to watch for this team because I don't know that they have a lot of depth, especially like in the starting pitching area. Um, because a lot of their guys that they would have depended on and kept to the minors are now up with them. So as long as they stay healthy, as long as they stay focused, I think this team contends. We need to, at some point in the near future, talk about what we think, how we think the division is going to break out. The Astros, the Angels, the Athletics, you know what I'm saying? And so, Astros fans, we got a lot to look forward to.
All right, we're covering everything that you need to know about the Astros, but what about the rest of sports? Now, the Locked On Podcast Network has you covered there as well with the Locked On Today. It's hosted by the great Peter Bukowski, and it's all the sports news you need to know every morning, another 20 minutes. Subscribe to the Locked On Today podcast wherever you get your podcast. And we'll be back tomorrow with hopefully our special guest. See you tomorrow, Brett, and go Astros.